Hello, everyone. Thanks for everyone being here. What I wanted to do, there's a lot of crossover, obviously, between donor engagement and marketing, but really what I wanted to do is distinguish between what Kelly and crew really talked about and look at from our perspective, who are those audiences that you're trying to reach with that great marketing. So I want to start out our panel with our panelists telling a little bit about themselves or organization, but really thinking about how they approach the big payback from a strategy of reaching out to those donors and connecting and engaging with them. So I will start with Rondy.
I'm Rondy Smith. I'm the founding executive director of Stop Ministries. That stands for Restore Survivors, Stop the Oppression of Human Trafficking. And we run a long-term residential care and restoration home out in the Lebanon, Tennessee area. And this will be our 4th year participating in the big payback because it has paid off for us. And so we were very glad to come and give back today by being on the panel because over the 3 years that we have participated, we have raised close to $50,000 through this platform. And for an organization our size, we're still a startup. I mean, we've just finished our first 2 years of operations. And so it has been a huge platform for us. And so we look forward to telling you more about how we have been able to be successful.
Hey guys, I'm Wes Harrell. I work at Siloam Health. We are a Christian-based nonprofit medical clinic here in Nashville that serves uninsured patients. I'm in the development world, but this is a new world to me. I started out at Salome in the volunteer department, and then about a year and a half ago, moved into the development department. And I focus primarily on church and community engagement. And so we'll tell you a little bit more about our strategies for the big payback, but that's kind of a quick introduction for me.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amy Cochran, and I work at the Refuge Center for Counseling in Franklin, not to be confused with Amy Alexander, our executive director. A lot of people came up, and Amy, such a good name. But we offer our counseling services on a sliding scale based on income. And I love the big payback. I was here as a newbie last year. I'd never before been a part of it, but the Refuge Center has been a participant for years. So last year we had a $50,000 goal and we exceeded it, I'm happy to say. And I'm just excited to share with you guys, a little bit about what I learned and what we learned together. And this training day is very, very helpful.
Awesome. So what we're going to do, we're going to have kind of a great integration of showing you some things on the big payback. We'll be talking about a few resources that have been in place since really the last couple of years, and then we'll be introducing some new tools and kind of demo and show that. But we'll go back and forth between the panel and kind of showing you the tool. So you'll see the tool itself, but then they'll help bring to life the concept behind it. So the first thing, and we heard this in the first panel from Elizabeth, talking about a match. We have long heard of people using a match over the course of the past 4 years. But one of the great things with our Civicor platform, which was new to us last year, is that you have a place on your profile page to put that information. Again, what the big payback day is about getting information out to people. So certainly, if you're able to, number one, secure a match, and I'll talk a little bit about that after showing you where you answer this, but on the profile, if you scroll down, there's a question, does your nonprofit organization have your own matching funds available for the big payback? You can toggle that and click yes. Once you click yes, you put in what is the amount available. What happens then on the day of, it assumes that your match is a pretty straightforward one. I have a match of $5,000. That means if I raise $5,000, then that $5,000 is going down because it has been matched, essentially. So your profile will show that. So we've seen people use that sort of typical one-to-one match. We've seen some other organizations have other forms of matching. One of the things that we talk about, the big payback, is really about, hey, this is an opportunity for new donors. I know we had one donor that we know of who has a fund at the Community Foundation who said to her, one of her favorite nonprofits, I want you guys to really try to capitalize on new donors. So I'm going to give you $10 for every new donor that you acquire during the big payback. So that's a little bit of a different kind of match, not necessarily something that you can put up there. And in that case, what happened was at the end, they used their donation information page and said, yep, here are the number of new donors. And then that donor gave the money afterwards. A couple of sort of administrative details about the match are, we've gotten the question of, well, does the match have to come through the big payback? And the answer to that is no. Part of that depends on what kind of match it is. We've had some organizations that have been successful and they've had that one-to-one match and they've been able to match it during the day. And so maybe they've brought a check down or they said, okay, donor, we've raised that $5,000 that you wanted to match. Go in and make your online contribution. That way that match flows through the community foundations. It's in your dollar totals. In other cases, people had a donor, maybe it was like the donor with the new donor match, and they didn't really know the answer to what was their match number until the end. In that case, the money didn't flow through the big payback, but it went directly to the organization, which certainly is fine. And then some other organizations too who had matches didn't have their donors put the money in, they just had them write it directly. What that means is if it doesn't come through the big payback, it doesn't show up in your total. So the great news is we talk about raising $9.3 million over the last 4 years, but in reality there's been more money than that because there have been matches out there that haven't flowed through. Amy, the Refuge Center was one of the organizations that successfully used a match, but she's going to certainly talk about their match, but I think she came at the break and talked about some great insight about starting to think, where do we start with acquiring a match for our organization? So I'll let her talk about that a little bit.
Okay. We had a match donor for the big payback. He matched $15,000, and he's done so for the past several years. And he's also a donor that has just been with us from the beginning. So not every place has a champion like that. So I was thinking with Amy, that is not a given every year that we're going to have him. I mean, it's not. So how would I? If he says he cannot donate this year, which please no, but if he says that, what would we do? So some of the things that came up in the first session was rallying your board, and I think Elizabeth talked about that earlier, getting them to collectively go in and do a match, and then also any kind of businesses that you guys work with, see if they would provide the match, even though you might not know ahead of time. And a lot of our donations came outside of the big payback. But giving them exposure that way to be your match. So I think that's what I would like to do. And I actually got some really good ideas. So glad I'm here about what some other new things that we could do.
Absolutely. And certainly all of us know where we see that match concept most successfully used is if you listen to public radio. There's not an hour during the day that there is not a match of some kind or some variation, and they use that quite expertly. So that's just another tool. Another tip that I would say, certainly, we saw matches everything from $250 listed to a very lofty $150,000. The thing I would say to anyone thinking about a match is, you want that match to be a stretch for donors, but you don't want it to be such a stretch that there's no way that you're ever going to meet it, because really what this day is about success and people having things to celebrate. So if you have something that's too lofty, you won't ever have that chance to be like, hey, we met our goal, we met a match, we met a milestone. So if you're thinking about matches, that would be one of my suggestions, is that you make it a little bit of a stretch, but not too much so that it's not likely that you will be successful with it. So the next point that we'll talk about, and this is less about a tool or technology, but we did want to go to the toolkit and reinforce some details about the ideas of offering incentives to donors. And because that's come up in a lot of questions over the years, we've encouraged people to have events, things that we can post about, our little party bus that's gone around to events, that we can have some content and additional media. But one of the things that's come up over and over again, people want to know, well, can I have an event where someone pays for a ticket and then they get something in return and then I can bring that money to you? The reality is, and you can look in the FAQs, that 100% of this donation is tax deductible. That's how we tax receipt the donors. So donors in return have to really get no tangible benefits, and we all know that when we're putting together galas and dinners, that we have to calculate that tangible benefit. So no donors to the Big Payback can get any tangible item. Over the years, we've seen people say, hey, if you give us at this amount, you can get tickets to a performance, or you can get XYZ, and we've had to make calls to say, you know, no, they can't really get that, because that has a dollar value attached to it. And from the IRS perspective, it's a very small value. Again, back to public radio, you can get a coffee mug, a keychain, but usually those dollar amounts are a bit larger, because the calculation is that something can't be worth more than 2% of what the dollar given is for it to be considered 100% deductibility. So just something like that. But one of the things that I did want to talk about is there are other ways to incentivize donors, right? Not giving them something. You don't really, especially with a new donor, want to set up that, oh, you get something in return if you give me something. You really want them to be giving because of your mission, not because they're getting something from you, tangibly anyway. So two of our panelists here have had incentives, great incentives, events that didn't have any sort of, I'll give you something if you give me something. So I'll let Wes talk first, because they had a really terrific incentive for their donors to make gifts to Siloam.
Thank you. And I didn't mention earlier, Salome has participated in the Big Payback every year now, so this will be our 5th year as well. Last year, a little context, before the Big Payback occurred, we were in kind of a heavy season at Siloam, particularly in messaging to our donors. We do the state contract for the initial wellness exams on all newly arrived refugees in the state of Tennessee. And so when the executive orders came out last January and the ensuing effect of that, we had a dramatic decrease in the number of refugees we were taking in, which had a financial impact on our budget to the tune of about $500,000. So messaging to that, how are we going to raise that money? And then all of a sudden, Big Payback hits. And we really intentionally thought through, we want to kind of have a lighthearted appeal this year. We wanted something a little more fun, a little more playful in the midst of a heavy season. And so someone on our staff, I wish I could take credit for this one, came up with this idea of a campaign that we simply called Eyes on the Pies. And the idea was, if we hit a $5,000 mark today on Big Payback, we are going to throw a pie in our CEO's face. And we're going to film it and show it on Facebook Live. And so we were amazed at the response from that. And not only did we raise enough to put a pie in his face. We raised enough to put 3 pies in his face. So $15,000 later, we were on Facebook Live, just throwing pies all over the guy. And so that was such a really kind of just creative but simple way to incentivize our donors. We had one actual longtime donor that commented and gave us feedback and said she had already made her gift for the year, but when she saw this campaign, she goes, "Oh, I've got to get a pie in Morgan's face. I've got to see that." So she gave another time on top of that.
And that's great. And I think one of the things, something like that, certainly you have to think about the personality of your organization and what makes sense. What are those relationships that you have with your donors? The Refuge Center had what I think is a great event, and they had donors come, and they didn't say, you need to give us money to come to this event, but it was really another opportunity and an incentive for donors, and I'm going to let Amy talk about that a little bit.
So the preparation calendar that's on the back, I take these things very seriously. So I was checking off, and I noticed day of checklist, host, day of promotion event. So I went back with my counterparts at Refuge Center, and what will we do this day? What can we do? So our campaign focused on the $30 gap that we must fundraise for every counseling session. And our campaign really focused on what happens in those counseling hours. And our therapists were on video sharing their stories of things that they've seen, because what we do is very private in nature, and we can't talk about our clients. And so we decided to have a coffee with the counselors the morning of the big payback, just to come by our office and meet our counselors, see our space. Because if you come to the Refuge Center, and we invite anyone to come by and see our space, but it's a quiet space. We have sound machine of noise deflectors going. We have essential oils. We have music. It's very calming, but you don't really see anything because the doors are shut. So we wanted to open up our space and have everyone be able to come in and see our play therapy room and ask counselors questions about our specialized therapy techniques, and it was a good event.
And there was also an opportunity for people to donate if they would like to. Not on the front end saying, hey, give us $20 and we'll give you the best cappuccino you've ever drank before, but come hear about us, be educated, see us from a different perspective, and then really understand that value of that dollar that you give us. So those are just some things to think about of how can we give people the opportunity to be motivated to give. Part of the big payback really is really about that time, right? The motivation is you have a deadline. We know this at the Community Foundation. We have grant deadlines, and people will often ask questions, oh, well, how many people have applied? I know you're a couple of weeks away from the deadline date. And it's like, oh, well, no one's applied yet. The deadline date isn't until 2 weeks from now. People need a deadline. And so with the big payback, that's really the incentive that we have given them, is that you have to give now within this time period. And then the other incentive to think about, maybe you don't have a match, or maybe you don't have a really thoughtful, creative way, then maybe what your opportunity to do, and the marketing group talked about this, but maybe the incentive is your strategy is to go after a prize. And so that is the incentive. So you really have to think about the many possible ways that you can encourage donors. And I'll make a plug, because certainly we talk about that 24-hour period, but something that was added last year and not hugely promoted because it came at the end, but one of the things that could be beneficial for you in terms of your donors, maybe you have some people traveling, maybe you have some people who have knee surgery during that 24-hour period. There is an opportunity for pre-scheduled donations. Donors can go in it'll be about a week or a week and a half out. We'll open that up, we'll provide you with that information, and then you can share that with donors to say if you'd like to pre-schedule your donation because you're gonna be gone or you're not gonna be here on the day, you'll be able to pre-schedule that donation. What will happen then, that will be preserved, and then it will hit during the 24-hour period of the big payback. So again, just another useful tool and resource. The next thing that we will talk about is the customized donation levels. This is something that Civicor has this technical feature, but it's something that we've encouraged people to think about in their promotion for the big payback over the course of time. You know, you could ask for people, oh, give us money on this day, and it's this very general blanket commentary. But where some people have really seen success are telling a story about how certain dollar levels have impact on their organization. So what you can do on the big payback is you'll see here the donation amount. There are preset amounts that are here, but down here on the right-hand bottom side, you can add a donation level, and you can customize a donation level to go in with those canned ones that are in there. And not only can you put in a custom amount, you can also put a description of what that dollar level will buy in your organization. So that's a good way. One of the things that we tell people is, you know, you might be messaging that, but isn't that great? You've said we need $30 for this. Now when they go to the page, oh, I heard that on the Facebook page. Now I'm going to go click on that $30 instead of the lowest point of entry, which is $10. So it might be an opportunity to bump donors up. And all of these organizations have used a focus on a specific dollar amount pretty successfully. And I'm going to let them tell you about how they went about that and how they targeted that message to donors. And I'll start with Rondy.
All right, I'm here to talk about the power of the minimum donation, the $10 donation. You have got to know your donor base. And so we know that we have a very engaged donor base, very passionate, very competitive, want to support our vision, but they're not a wealthy donor base. But the multiplier effect of the $10 gift is very powerful. And so that's the one we have pushed, and we have kept that before them all the time, because we just say, what other 24-hour period could simply a $10 gift do so much? And it's been important for us because when you think about your overall fundraising plan and you have to think about where does the big payback fall along with your other events, and with our annual gala being in early September, we don't want to cannibalize from that event, but a $10 gift, on the big payback day, in addition to what they're going to do at the gala, is something great. And then if you're getting them to get all of their friends to give $10, it really does add up. Also, engaging the younger generation. A lot of us are trying to engage next gen. And for us, human trafficking is a big issue among college students. And so $10 for college students is doable. So trying to get our college friends of Rest Stop to talk to their fraternities and their sororities and all of that. And again, they love contests and games. And so really making it fun and doing it that way. And then also a way to, we all need to grow our donor base. So brand new donors are not as likely to give you that large gift the first time. They'll give you $10. So we have milked the power of the 10.
Wes, do you want to talk about how you used any specific dollar amount?
Yeah, as I said earlier, we did a little bit more lighthearted approach to our incentive or our goal last year. The $5,000 mark was to put a pie in the face of our Salome, but we certainly wanted to connect that back to the impact that it had on the clinic. And so $5,000 for us is what we label as a gift of a day. What it costs to run our entire clinic for one day is $5,000. So we got to then report back to everyone that donated, not only did you raise enough to run our clinic for a day, you raised enough to run our clinic for 3 days, and the impact that has. And so for us, we have different kind of tiers of giving throughout all our appeals during the year, particularly our monthly giving. And so if you give X amount of dollars per month, this is what that equates to over the course of a year and the impact that it has in the clinic. On Big Payback, we didn't necessarily feel like we wanted to spell all that out and kind of almost cause a little more confusion. We wanted to keep it simple. And so that's why we went with just that 5,000 target goal and what that impact would have.
Well, I agree. I think having a story behind what your giving level, what your targeted level is so important. As I mentioned, $30 funds one session, and that is the difference between what we receive from the client, the average what we receive from the client, and versus what it costs to give us. So we focused on that hour at $30. We didn't want it to get into our annual gala, I guess, in October. So we really felt like that was a doable and reachable amount for our donors. And we just, every hour, pushing out stories from our counselors on what that hour, you might not think an hour in therapy can do very much, but it is so powerful. And that's what we wanted to communicate, what your $30 could give for someone. It could give them, they could start to heal from an abusive situation, or they could learn to, start the wheels turning to forgive someone, or just so many stories that we had on what that $30 can do, because so much of what we do is private, no one will ever know, but it is very impactful.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things after the morning session that Amy talked about was, you do see $1,000 up there, and that may be lofty for someone, but we certainly have seen $1,000 donors over the course of the Big Payback. And Amy said, I think, on average, the life of someone going through counseling costs about $1,000. So really thinking about that you have different audiences. Maybe you do only have $10 donors, but maybe you have different groups. So really thinking about, is there a message or a story that's going to appeal to different groups of people? Because that's really what the Big Payback is all about. You want to get the new donors, but you want your returning donors. Or maybe there's a segment of your population that supports your organization but has never given you money. I asked Wes, because he said he came from the volunteer department, is Salome really good about asking volunteers for money? And his answer was, well, we're trying to get better. And I would say every organization that we've talked to over the years has said, gosh, our volunteers give us so much time, like we're hesitant to really ask them for money. But some have thought about the Big Payback as an opportunity to really dip their toe in the water and reach out to different groups, whether it's a volunteer group and reaching and talking to them about a certain dollar level. Maybe it's talking about a volunteer and it's like, we need more volunteers and your value of your time is worth X. Would you help to give money as if we had another volunteer? Something like that. We've had performing arts organizations say, people subscribe to us, they already spend a lot of money on tickets, or they already give to us for so many other things. But you know what? We haven't asked those people who just bought a ticket that one time. So thinking about different segments of the population that you can reach and talk to them about how a certain dollar level can support your organization. That's really this idea behind using specialized dollar amounts in your messaging on your profile. So the next, and I think really exciting component, is a new feature, a completely new feature, just like the customized donation levels. But one of the things that we've talked about over the years is finding ambassadors for your organization, people that are willing to push things out on their social networks, and something that is a new feature sort of takes that to the next level. And I think something that we've seen play out over the course of the last 5 years, people know about GoFundMe and people know about CrowdRise and they know about different things. But one of the new features on the Big Payback is individuals can set up fundraising campaigns and set goals to help raise money for your organization. You as the organization are still in control. you can say yes, no, you can help edit that profile. But what we're going to do is we're going to go and show you on the Big Payback how you go about, or how a donor goes about an individual, setting up an individual campaign. So you go into the profile. Here's an example of a campaign page, but down at the bottom again, a very obvious button, create a campaign. And a donor goes in. The great thing about this, like with all of the components of Civicor, those little question marks really give you the detail. So all of the items that have stars by them are required. Jessica's typing in now what the unique URL is. Then you're going to type in a paragraph. An individual's going to type in why they want to raise money for this organization, why it's important to them. And then there are additional elements. They put in the summary. They can put in any personal details, personal appeal. They can upload files like a photo, maybe a photo of themselves, a photo of them volunteering for the organization. And then they put in their campaign goal. And they don't click a button and it's live right away. What they do is they click a button to submit campaign for approval. And then you or whoever is the administrator on your profile page for the Big Payback can go in and see that there's a campaign waiting to be approved. And that's in the same area where you find your donation information, where you put in your multimedia. They can go in, they can view it, they can edit it, and then they can approve or decline. And what ends up happening is on your profile page, immediately visible will be 2 profiles of people that are doing fundraising, but then you can click down. You can have as many campaigns as you want, or individuals to be doing fundraising campaigns. And it's just another way, again, to create that reach opportunity for people that maybe in the past were posting about how great is this organization, I want to tell you about it. Now, just like people are doing on Facebook, I'm raising money for this organization. This is something where we've really seen things push forward, and it really opens up that network. And I know Rondy said they, during Giving Tuesday, had used a campaign mode. So I'll let her talk about that a little bit, and then I'll talk a little bit about a conversation that Amy and I were having at the break.
Yeah, we're excited about this new feature, the individual giving pages, and we will definitely be utilizing that in our strategy this year. We learned that lesson on Giving Tuesday. I don't know how many of you participated in the Facebook campaign, and I found out about it late, but the Gates Foundation matching all of that. And so it was definitely very successful to have individuals creating pages for us. So we will utilize that. We have always used ambassadors, and I want to speak to that. It is so important. I know many of you feel, if you're a small nonprofit, and I'll speak to that, you feel like you're a one-man shop, you don't have a big team, but find ambassadors to share the load with you on Big Payback. Get them trained and up to speed and ready on everything, because you never know what's going to happen. So the first 2 years that we participated, I was our lead strategist, our lead cheerleader, and just planned to do that again for year 3. And I ended up having to bury my mother on the day of the Big Payback. And had I not had all of those ambassadors already in place, ready to run the campaign for us, that would have been tragic. We still were able to come in second place in the small business category, small budget category, and that is because of my team. So Team Rest Stop.
Great. One thing that came up, again, because this is a new feature and really kind of thinking and brainstorming, Amy asked a great question. You know, we have all kinds of resources, pre-populated information about the big payback in our toolkit, but we talked about, is there anything in the toolkit really about the campaigns? And, you know, obviously if somebody is setting up an individual campaign for your organization, that's going to be organization specific. So maybe if you're thinking about letting people or promoting the idea of them setting up individual campaigns, thinking about, could you create your own toolkit for someone who wants to be an ambassador or for someone who wants to do individual fundraising campaigns for your organization? It doesn't have to be hard. It can be canned information, but then you can let people know that they can go in and customize it and make it their own. But really, what can you do to provide a toolkit for people that could help raise more money for your organization? And then the final thing I'm going to mention before I get the hook is Amy asked a great question. Well, these individual fundraisers, I know we talked about we can't give incentives or gifts or anything like that to someone to someone giving money to our organization, but, you know, we have t-shirts or we have note cards for someone who is raising money on an individual campaign and they reach their goal. Could we give them a gift for that as a thank you? Absolutely, the answer is yes, because that's not about them making a donation. That's about them being an advocate and volunteering. So really, it's a thanks to them for fundraising on your behalf. So again, you may not have incentives that you can give, but that may be a way to thank someone or encourage people. Again, you don't necessarily want it to be about you're giving them something other than just simply knowing that they're supporting your great work of your organization. But I want to thank the panelists for what they'd offered us, and thanks y'all for being here.